for me, please, and I'll hand over to the chair.
Yeah. Shirley, can I just jump in? Councillor Marshall has just contacted me saying that his invitation's not working, so we could just sort that one out so he can jump in.
Yeah. Okay, will do. Yeah. Yep, well, okay to go, Chair, thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee on Wednesday, the 6th of January. Okay, I hope everybody has had a fantastic Christmas and Happy New Year to you all. So if we could just move on to agenda item number 1, which is introductions and attendance at the meeting. Have we got any apologies, Shirley?
I've got apologies from Councillor Paley.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, which is to declare any interest. Are there any interests that anyone within the committee would like to declare today?
Chair, I have discussed this with Mark on item number 6, but it seems I don't need to declare an interest. But I'm just would like it to be minuted that I have asked that question. Okay,
thanks for making that comment, Councillor Jones. Okay, agenda item number 3, which is to move the minutes of this committee for the meeting of Thursday, the 5th of November. Okay, is there any comments that anybody would like to make? Okay, I would just like to make some comments in terms of the work programme. There was potentially a piece of work on youth and employment and health and wellbeing and productivity of staff, which I think will come to within the work programme. But in terms of the discussing with other scrutiny committee chairs, it's not something which I've done following having a briefing with Elizabeth Davidson and also discussing with Councillor Harker, but we'll come to that later. So I propose to move the minutes. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
Seconded, sorry. Yeah. Sorry for, I was on mute. Sorry, I'm shouting seconded at you.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item number 4, which is an update on the business grants scheme. And this is a verbal update. And is this something that you're going to pick up, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Clearly, this is an ever-moving picture, given the changes in restrictions, etc., and the new lockdown. But we thought it might be useful for members to be given an update on where we are with the various types of business grants regimes that have been in position since March last year, but have obviously been changing in many different ways over the last 9 months or so. And clearly there's a big change which was announced by the Chancellor of the Exchequer yesterday, which I'm sure Andrew in his presentation will be able to pick up on. These still, I have to remind members, just need to be firmed up first, and guidance from government is forthcoming on these. But we're getting there, and hopefully, as we've done before, we'll roll out these grants as quickly as possible to ensure that local businesses can take advantage of the awards that are available to them, whatever type of business sector they're currently working within. So with your permission, Chair, if I could pass over to Andrew Perkins, he will give us an update of where we are with the grants, and also hopefully with the new regime that's forthcoming, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, since the committee last met on the 5th of November, it's been quite a turbulent country, for the town itself, for our businesses as well. And clearly, in terms of the pandemic and the impacts it's having, we've been through various stages of lockdown, different tiers, etc. In response to that, the government have announced a series of different funding measures since November the 5th to support businesses to deal with the circumstances that they are currently experiencing. I think one of the things we've kind of learnt is because of the very fluid nature of COVID-19 and the impacts it's having, that currency can be a matter of days. It can be 5 days, 10 days, 20 days. So we've actually had a really turbulent time in the last sort of 6 weeks in dealing with sort of the business support mechanisms that have been provided by government. It falls on local authorities to administer these schemes for central government, but the actual guidance is provided by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So we're actually just providing an administrative service for government to administer the grants to support the businesses. In Darlington Council, we've been doing it jointly between the business investment team and the business rates team, working together to best administer these different schemes. To put it into context, since the 5th of November, the government have announced 6 different support schemes for business. So in the space of 8-9 weeks, we've actually had 6 different potential schemes to support local businesses. And clearly our business community are obviously in need of financial support. Many are desperate for any kind of grant funding that they can get. So there's been obviously a lot of interest in the various schemes, and I suppose a lot of interest and lots of sort of applications and sort of inquiries in how to deal with them. The scheme's actually very confusing because they've all got very similar titles, and the only real difference between the majority of them is whether they refer to the time Darlington was in Tier 2, whether we were under national lockdown, the time we were in Tier 3, the brief period we were in Tier 4, and then there's a couple, which one's a particular scheme for wet-led pubs to provide a Christmas support payment of £1,000. And then there's also a small discretionary scheme that the government have allocated to every local authority to provide our own, to address our own priorities. So between the business investment team and the business rates team, we've been kind of managing these 6 different schemes over this time period. We've got the data for each individual scheme, which I'm happy to provide, but I think it's just worth pointing out sort of the key headlines. From those 6 schemes alone, we've actually received and processed 1,555 grant applications. So that gives you sort of a sense of the scale of the volume of inquiries, of interest, of I suppose of work in delivering and processing these applications. Of those 1,500, we've actually approved and paid out 1,133 different grants. So again, there's a substantive amount of funding been awarded there. The actual amount of money we've paid out is £1,587,000. So again, in that short period of time, quite a lot of money has been awarded to Darlington businesses in that period. I think it's worth pointing out as well, that's on top of the grants that we've processed earlier in the year and awarded to the Darlington business community. Whether that be the small business grant, the hospitality and leisure grants that were available, or the discretionary grants. And there was over like 2,000 grants awarded in the first part of the year. And again, just to give you a headline, the total amount of grants that we've given to Darlington businesses as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic is almost £27 million since April. So again, that's the scale of the support that's been awarded to the business community, and every local authority across England is doing a very similar activity. So again, you can probably appreciate the sort of the size, scale, and scope of what the business support financial mechanisms the government have put in place will be. The last scheme the government announced was actually on Thursday last week, which was support for Tier 4 grants. We actually launched it on Monday, on Monday lunchtime. So we've taken a few applications already on that particular scheme, but of course on Tuesday the government, the England went into national lockdown, and with that the government announced yet more different types of support measures to support particular types of businesses. We've actually got a webinar with Bays this lunchtime to understand the guidance and what the expectations are for those grant schemes, and we're hoping that we can hopefully go live with those schemes in the next couple of days to again support the local business community. And that sort of concludes the overview of the sort of where we are with the grant schemes.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Has anybody got any questions? I've got Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding the tremendous effort that's gone in by Darlington Borough Council employees to get this rolled out and the significant support, is there any sense of businesses that haven't qualified, that might have slipped through the cracks and who might be suffering or at risk of collapse?
Thank you for that. Yes, there is, if I'm brutally honest. A lot of the government-led financial incentives are for businesses which have properties, which have a business rates liability. So for many businesses, whether they be businesses which sublet space, they're in shared space, or whether they work from home, in many cases they are ineligible for the government support, and we're receiving queries from them. And I think one of the issues we did with some of the discretionary funding that the Darlington Borough Council has been awarded, we tried to then give some level of support to some of those businesses, so particularly those businesses which sublet space in other areas. For example, hairdressers which rent chairs seems to be a common example, or those people who work in shared business space but don't pay rates. And again, we've got a number of examples across Darlington in that case. Having said that, there are still a number of businesses which are falling through the cracks, and it tends to be those businesses which are self-employed and relatively new. There is a scheme called the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, but effectively you need to have been submitting your HMRC returns for the last 2 or 3 years to do that. So anybody who's not done that is not eligible for that particular support scheme. And we have a number of business inquiries whereby the support schemes that are in place in terms of grants are not available to assist them because they're primarily related to ongoing fixed costs. And the SISE scheme, the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, they're finding themselves ineligible for, and therefore there are some businesses who are not receiving any support at this moment in time.
Thank you, Chair.
Just picking up on that, Andrew. You said we are aware. Do we know how many businesses?
We don't know how many. We don't actually have a register of all the businesses, and we can't get the data off HMRC, unfortunately. But certainly from the number of inquiries, we're probably talking about it could be around. I'm hesitating. It could be around 50 to 60 from the beauty sector, which seems to be the main sector. But again, there's a wider issue in terms of a number of people who are self-employed and work at home, so such as accountants, photographers. There's a whole range of self-employed individuals, and that figure could be up to maybe sort of 1,000 different businesses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. I think you're on mute there. 2 questions. Firstly, what kind of feedback have we been having from businesses that have been receiving the grants in terms of is the money enough? And secondly, you may have answered this slightly there in your last answer, but do we have figures on businesses that have permanently closed in the past year? And if so, or you may have this anyway, how many businesses have been permanently closed that have already received grants from the council? I'm assuming that you track the progress of the businesses that you're giving grants to. So do we have any figures like that?
Thank you. In terms of feedback from those who've received financial support from the council, generally it's obviously very grateful, but as you kind of indicated there, it's not enough. I need more to cover my basic fixed operating costs. So that seems to be a general comment from across different sectors in Darlington. In terms of businesses that have closed, we're not actually aware of many that have formally announced their closure. Certainly in terms of where we've been awarding grants, we haven't actually come into, certainly I'm not aware of any business that has said it has closed. Having said that, there are many who are on the brink of closure. They're surviving, but there's a lot of talk about how the future might look for those individual businesses. I suppose that's our immediate and our longer term concern, is how many of the businesses will be able to trade coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic whenever that happens and is available to them. So I think that's a real big concern in the future. But yeah, we are obviously monitoring the schemes. We are monitoring sort of our own sources of where we know businesses are closing. What seems to be happening is businesses are just downsizing massively. They're not necessarily closing at this moment in time, but they are losing staff. They are moving away from their properties and adopting new models of working. At the moment, predominantly working from home. But again, we've been speaking to a few people about actually looking for small scale office space in the future. So it's probably a new way of working for a lot of businesses. They don't need what property they've got, but they do need something.
So just to follow up on that, just to check, how do you follow up on feedback? Is there a journey with the business, a constant follow up, or is it just one-off phone call, just say how you're getting on?
At the moment, it tends to be just a one-off contact with the businesses. Just at the moment, the volume of inquiries and applications coming in, well, we haven't got the time to dedicate. But we're through the teams, we're kind of building relationships with, excuse me, building sort of relationships with a large number of businesses. So we're kind of talking to many around what they're going through, what different schemes they're eligible to apply for. I think I mentioned in the comment, they're all very similarly titled, and businesses are getting very confused about which grants they are eligible for, which grants they've claimed. So we're kind of doing a hand-holding service to talk through and help businesses say, well, our records show you've applied for X, Y, and Z, but you are eligible for something else as well. So trying to just talk through those businesses, and that's where we're getting more of the qualitative feedback in terms of how businesses are coping with this moment in time, and that's where the comment comes through about they're surviving in inverted commas, but there's a longer term concern.
Okay, thank you.
Got Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor McEwen's question about whether businesses falling through the cracks. I mean, I guess it's inevitable given that a lot of the legislation is having to be hurriedly put together. But is there any formal mechanism that local authorities have got to feed back to point out where there are, gaps that businesses are failing, so that changes can be made to help? And I sort of appreciate that you are swamped with work, but unless there is some means of feeding back, generally government isn't going to know. There's been lots in the press about this sort of stuff, but unless it's some formal way of feeding that information back, I guess, the powers that be can't actually do anything about it.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, there are ways that we can report back to government of the local experiences, and as you said, the example there of businesses that are falling through the cracks and not getting any help. We have had a series of I mentioned earlier, we've got a webinar today, but it's almost like a Q&A session with officers from BEIS to actually explain to us what our experiences are and maybe sort of try and influence them in terms of how future funds can be shaped to then support some of those areas. We also work very closely with the North East Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Small Business to share our local experience, to share our individual cases whereby businesses are falling through the cracks or ineligible for support, and helping those organisations lobby government directly as well.
And if I can follow through, from your experience, are you seeing that BEIS is actually listening and adapting to the feedback they're getting from local authorities and the Chambers of Commerce, for that matter?
If I'm honest, I think the BEIS are providing financial support only to provide to support those businesses with ongoing property costs. They haven't shifted from that line since the outbreak of the pandemic. If a business doesn't have ongoing property costs, the government just don't seem to want to extend that level of support out. And the counter argument is that the size scheme will help those individuals, because if you've no property costs but you've lost income, then the size scheme is designed to help you. I think where we locally and peers across Tees Valley are experiencing is those businesses which are not fully compliant with the size scheme, i.e. they've got less than 3 years HMRC records.
Right.
Do you want to follow up with another question, Councillor?
Well, I do, but I suppose I'm not sure what the question is really. It's difficult to know from what you're saying there whether someone somewhere has a view about it and there's a rationale behind it, or whether nobody's picking up on it, because from the way you presented it, it doesn't make any sense that those differences are there and that some businesses are ending up with no support, because at the end of the day, it's someone's business and it's people's livelihood that's being threatened as a consequence. I'm sort of lost for words as to, without any real understanding, I think the schemes, why that's the case.
I agree, Councillor. I think it's very difficult to accept that there are a number of businesses across England who are not receiving support, and there are actually a number of business groups, sector groups, local individuals who come together to lobby on behalf of this number of businesses who are falling through the cracks. Only yesterday, the FSB made a big push to government to talk about, despite the range of support that's available, there are still some businesses which have received no support during this pandemic. And obviously, we will support them as much as we can to lobby and influence. But at the end, we still deal with. We've had one this morning, as it happens, a hairdresser, a mobile hairdresser, who doesn't have any ongoing fixed property costs. Only actually started up 10 months before the pandemic hit, and because she hasn't got a full year's HMRC records, she's not eligible for the income support grant, so she gets signposted to the universal credit. And so there's a response, but actually it's whether the response is supportive enough for that business, for those businesses to survive and come through the pandemic.
Right. I suspect we're going to have a long conversation about it, but thank you for your responses.
I've got Councillor Curtis and Councillor Tate.
Yeah, it's Councillor Curtis. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the same line Steve's just been talking about there, we should maybe be coming up with some sort of listings of the businesses that's suffering these problems and promoting them through our MPs, you know, if the council could give them the information and lists and the types of businesses, perhaps they can raise that at a higher political level.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, certainly, we've certainly got lists of people who contacted us directly, and we can, to be fair, we already have highlighted some of the issues to the MP, but I think it would be very useful to actually quantify it, to say we are talking 150 businesses are in this situation, so it makes it real.
Is that something that you could pull together, Andrew?
Yes, certainly, yes.
For this committee, and then we can look what we can do with that. Okay, I've got Councillor Tate, and then I'll bring Councillor McEwen back in, and then we'll close on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Andrew for the update, and thank you for the support that you've given me in regards to the queries that I've had from local businesses in my area. I agree with you, and the feedback from the business is that the different funding pots is making it confusing for businesses, and some don't know which ones to apply for. So just to confirm, if a business does apply for the wrong pot of funding, would we simply go back and say you're not eligible, or would we say to them, actually, you're not eligible for this pot, but you are eligible for the other pot? Are we currently doing that?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, we are. We're actually identifying all of the duplicate applications for all of the schemes, and then going through them to actually signpost them to exactly what support we think they should be applying for, and giving them the links to the application forms, so that it's almost like a very clear pathway for them. We actually spent a couple of hours last night just going through about 20 of them, just to say, right, okay, what would they be eligible for? What have they qualified for so far? Just to give them that bit of hand-holding and a bit of support, because the government are very concerned about people submitting duplicate applications and trying to access obviously double monies.
Yeah.
Most people are doing it because every grant's called the LRSG something, and it's just confusing. So our job is to help them through that confusion, and we do it to the best that we can.
Yeah, that's been some of the feedback that I've been getting in the conversations that we've had, is that people aren't necessarily trying to attempt to get two lots of money, but they're not sure which one is eligible to them, so they apply for both. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say I actually had an email from a Darlington accommodation provider last night, actually, saying that thank you for the help in signposting them to the right grant. You are much better than Middlesbrough and Stockton councils. Okay. So I'm going to frame that email.
Just a follow-up question, if that's okay. In regards to the lockdown period that ended on the 2nd of December, if my dates are right, are we through all the applications received for that particular period?
The one that ended on the 2nd, the national lockdown. No, the scheme is still live.
But the applications we've had already, have we still got some waiting? Yeah,
we've had 870 applications for that. There are 722 we've approved. Part of the problem, because it's such a fluid situation and the grants change so quickly, we're not able to we've contacted every business via email to say you are eligible for this grant, in our opinion, apply, but not everybody does, and we now need to spend a bit of time backtracking and going back to some of those earlier schemes to make sure that every business who is eligible knows they're eligible and puts an application in. So we think, for example, there's about 1,500 businesses which are eligible for that national lockdown grant between 5th of November and 2nd of December, but we've only had 900 applications, so we've got a bit of work to do to backtrack onto that.
Okay. Anyone that doesn't sort of qualify for that pot, and I'm probably speaking about the beauticians and the hairdressers, because that's really been the most of my queries.
Yep.
And it's the situations where they're inside a bigger property, so they're not the business rates payer, so don't qualify for that pot. Yep. Would we then signpost them to the discretionary pot or not?
That is correct, yes. We would. It's called the Additional Restrictions Scheme Grant, which we've slightly amended our eligibility criteria to include people like beauticians who sublet space, chairs within other established businesses.
Okay, thanks very much. That's me. Thank you.
Okay, bring in Councillor McEwen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's not a question because I don't think it can be answered. It's more a statement. One reflection that I would share with the committee is what will this mean in a year? And by that I mean clearly there's a lot of businesses that will suffer. We've talked about some that will fall through the cracks, and ultimately that may mean a reshaping of the economy. I'm thinking of hospitality, for example. How many will go? So when I say it's not a question, I don't think we can answer it, but I think in time, maybe a year's time, what will this mean for the economy? Certainly some of the businesses that may not make it through, the staff involved or the owners of those businesses will have skills and they'll be able to start up. But I think it is an interesting question that perhaps we can't answer now, but in a year's time we need to look at it, because there will be some reshaping of the economy, I suspect.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll again, just a quick response to add to that, I suppose. Yes, we are aware of a number of businesses in Darlington which might close. They've not announced anything yet, because obviously there's lots of consequences to that. But it is the hospitality sector particularly whereby we will see a definite change in the Darlington's hospitality offer. And that's probably one of our concerns, whereby we will keep sort of monitoring that situation. As you said, as we pull out of the pandemic, whenever that be, we'll then start to see what the new hospitality sector looks like in Darlington.
Can I make an additional? I know you want to move on. I'll be brief. Is it okay, Chair?
Yeah, as long as.
I mean, one of the implications of that clearly will be if there's a limiting of supply of a certain service, that there'll be price implications. So, you know, I sound like a Thatcherite. Slap me if you want, Steve. But competition's good in terms of, you know, improving quality and decreasing price. Speaking as an economist.
And sorry, just to add to that, bizarrely, we've already had 3-4 inquiries from people wishing to start new bars in Darlington, which,
gosh,
personally I find strange in these times that somebody would consider that. But as you said, market forces say, well, there will be a new look hospitality sector and people see gaps in the market. So yes.
Well, I said bring that to a close. I'd just like to say thank you, Andrew, to yourself and the team. You're obviously talking considerable numbers of businesses that are contacting you in a never moving environment. So, you know, really appreciate all the hard work. And as I said, if you could come back with a list of the businesses that we feel are falling through the cracks, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we now move on to agenda item number 5, which is a verbal update of the Towns Fund, and hand over to, is it yourself, Mark, or is it Chris?
Thanks, Chair. It'll probably be a bit of a team effort, but I think Chris has finished a presentation, which hopefully members we can share with members, and we'll update them on what progress has been made. Clearly, the £1 million that we received back in the early autumn has to be spent by the end of March this year. So quite a task given the environment that we're currently working in, but hopefully with a degree of ingenuity we can ensure that particular fund is spent. We've done a lot of work already with regards to I suppose pulling out the specifications of what we require in regards to lighting, in regards to investment into the yards, etc. And we've had we've had at least one really useful meeting with the stakeholders, which is the businesses within the yards, which was warmly welcomed by those businesses, where we went through the initial approaches that we're looking to adopt. But again, I think members will appreciate that it's about not being done to, but being done with the businesses, and I think they really appreciated that particular stakeholder meeting. We've got another meeting with them I think next week, again, to go through finalising some of the ideas that we have for the yards. I know it's a lot of money. It sounds a lot of money, £1 million, but with the types of work that we're doing, it could quite easily be absorbed without people actually noticing what we've done. But we think that the work that we are proposing is very impactful. And by the early spring, we're pretty confident that all of our commitments will be made and actually delivered. So I'll pass over to Chris, if that's okay, Chair, and hopefully, Chris, you can technology will allow you to carry out this presentation.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair. I'll upload the presentation and take it from there. Is that on the screen now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, as Mark mentioned, the update here will look at the £1 million and at the £22.3 million, which is the main towns fund. So the forward funding, which is the £1 million, as Mark mentioned there, we're looking at the 4 intervention areas, which we've talked about previously, which is the yards, phase 1 in Clarks and Bucktons. Also looking at, that should be 2, 3, 4. We're also looking at the town centre lighting enhancements and town centre Wi-Fi, and also acquisition of property in Northgate, the southern end of Northgate. We're looking at that target completion date, which is the 31st of March. So everybody knows where that is, but we're looking at Bucktons Yard from High Road to Skinnergate, and likewise Clark's Yard. At the moment, this is phase 1. So where we're at, Mark mentioned that meeting that we had on the 27th of November with businesses and property owners from both of the yards. It was well attended, and certainly I enjoyed the meeting. It was very interactive. I think seemed to go down quite well. We've got another one of those, as you can see lower down, on the 11th, which is next Monday. We'll do it on a similar sort of format with an agenda and a presentation. And the presentation, you know, there's a lot of interaction during the presentation itself with specific issues. If there's individual property issues or issues people want to take offline, then I'm happy to engage with them via email or telephone. I have been on the site quite a few times outside during the last few months, just to familiarise myself and look at various issues. I apologise for my throat this morning. Actually, I'm struggling with my voice for some reason. I feel fine, so it's nothing. Some of the buildings within the yards are listed, so any work we're doing or proposing to do on those has required a listed building application to be made. So we've done that in December, and what will happen is we'll hopefully gain approval for that within February, and we'll fit that work within the timescales of getting the delivery. So we're just about, it says ongoing design and discussion with business and owners. So we're doing that, and the design is, because of the type of work it is, it'll never be fully complete. There'll be stuff that changes as we're on site, but as far as getting the design and giving it to the contractor, we're very nearly there with that. We're engaged with our public works organisation, and they'll be delivering the majority of the works with subcontractors. So the next steps are we're going to agree that design and commence the works, importantly, and this has been on the 11th, the listed building, and we're looking to deliver from this month, from now pretty much, up to the end of March. Appreciating that there's lots of words on this, and you cannot read anything. You will be sent this presentation, so you'll be able to look at it at your leisure. But this is the current design proposals for the public realm and the landscape. There's other proposals on top of this, which are the buildings that can range from anything from sorting out bits of loose wire to tidying up to putting new doors on, new windows. Some shop fronts will be in phase 2, but you can see down the bottom that we've agreed on the type of benching in various things with planters. The lighting is important. We're looking, there's, by the lighting, I mean the decorative lighting. There's already sort of Christmas type lighting strung down various parts of the yard, which is good during the night time, not so pretty during the day. It looks a bit like barbed wire type of thing when you're underneath it. So we're in discussions with a lighting supplier at the minute to put up something which could demonstrate and show that we can improve on that. So that's in the process in the next couple of weeks, where we'll get a bit of a demonstration area probably provided in this area of Buckton's Yard. It'll be typical sort of festoon type lighting, where it probably comes across at a bit of a triangular affair. You'll have seen them elsewhere, and they look quite impressive. So the lighting enhancements within the town centre, we're focused in on these 5 areas at the moment, and the clock tower and the police statue we've now got, and the benches. We've got design proposals for all of these. The clock tower was a little bit delayed because of getting a scheme which was acceptable in terms of the listed building, and making sure that what we did wasn't didn't take away from that listing. So we've got a scheme now, and it's been submitted in for planning and listed building consent. So we should be getting that towards the end of the month, I would hope, beginning of February. It's all lined up. Procurement for all of these is in place. So once we get the final approval, we're ready to go. St Cuthbert's Church, we've had a particular success there. It's been through the diocese, their processes, and procurement's been agreed, the method of procurement. And we're just now waiting for a period of consultation, which the diocese does, which finishes next week. And then from there, we'll be able to order and get the work started. Town centre Wi-Fi, no changes here. That isn't specifically what we may end up doing, but that's the target. So what we're looking at, we've been out to procurement for suppliers and installers, and the returns have been made. I haven't seen them yet. That's happening. I've got a meeting tomorrow on that, and depending on what we've received and if it's acceptable and the scheme is finally agreed, then we should be able to deliver January to March. That's the target there. No change on Northgate property. I didn't want to put any particular detail in here. We'll have some success, or having some success just before Christmas with the property. I haven't updated on that yet, but I will be getting an update from our estates team and seeing where we're at with that. But there was a reasonable success rate with one of them. Looking at the town deal, it's now referred, the Towns Fund this is the main 25 million that we applied for to government. It's now called our town deal, which the government has offered us via a heads of terms, has been offered at 22.3 million, which has been accepted by the Towns Board. It's been signed by the Chair and Paul Wildsmith, and we've sent that back to government, and we're now awaiting signature from the Secretary of State to trigger the next part of the process. So there's 9 interventions within the Towns Fund application that was made at the end of July. Call them intervention projects. They're basically that some of them are specific projects, some are areas, and we need to refine those down into projects. But of the 9 intervention projects that were included in the application, all 9 were agreed within the heads of terms. Excuse me. So it was a very successful application, really, in terms of that. We didn't get the full 25 million. We don't know why. The figure was put back to 22.3, but that's what the offer has been made, and that's what has been accepted. So now, at this stage, the next pieces of work will be detailed project development for each of the interventions, and provision of a fairly detailed business case for each of those. We don't have to submit the business cases themselves to government, but as you'll see on the next slide, there's a bit of a process we need to go through here. So by the 15th of January, so in 9 days' time, we have to provide, it's a template for each of the projects that we'll have to fill in to say how we've prioritised the projects within the 22.3 million, and our plan to address any conditions that they've imposed within the heads of terms. The conditions are generic across all of the projects, which there's nothing too onerous in there. And there's some conditions against some of the specific intervention projects, which at this stage we can address, and I don't see any particular issue by the 15th of January. That time will tell as we go through the business case in each one, and I'm sure we'll be able to comply. So stage 2, the next stage is going to completion of the business case, which is 12 months from agreeing the heads of terms. So we've got basically within the next 10 months or so, we've got to provide a business case for each one of the 9 interventions. And then on completion of the business cases, there's a summary document that we must submit to. There's a template which government have provided, which we need to complete and say to them that we've completed all our business cases. This is a summary of the outcomes. This is our funding profile for each one. We believe we can satisfy all the conditions. Subject to that, we'll get the money. We'll start getting the money on a yearly basis. So in summary on the priorities, I think the important message to get across is that the way the projects have been prioritised within the 22.3 million allows us to progress with all 9 of the project interventions. There has been some reductions on across the 9, and just for interest, there was the Linear Park area, which includes basically the back of North Road, between North Road and the river, up from the Real Heritage Quarter, head of steam, down to the ring road. We've reduced that by $500,000, and that is mainly we're looking to provide alternative funding for the car parking area up towards the top, looking at the highways funding, that side of things. We're not looking to reduce the schemes at all. We're looking towards alternative forms of funding to plug the gap. Likewise, another reduction is, the biggest one is on 2 million, which is a reduction of 2 million, which is aimed at the Northgate House, so Northgate Road area, but it's Northgate House in particular, which is an area which is targeted for mainly housing. So we'd be looking at a housing funded scheme there, possibly with our own sources of housing funds or private developments, but it needs to develop further that. And the other one, the last point, 200,000 is on the T-levels funding with the college. There's likely to be a T-levels capital funding pot, which will be put forward, which the colleges can apply for. So we've agreed with the college that they will be putting an application forward for that. Now it may be 200,000, but may be able to apply for more. Obviously, we will do if we can, but that is to be seen. So that is where we're at the moment. Get back to the screen if I can. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. Really positive. We're cooking on gas. Yeah. So if I just open it up to the floor, so I've got Councillor Cruddas.
Yes, I just wondered. We had a map of the yards, which was we couldn't read a lot too, but there looked to be an opportunity to open it out into the yard that's closest to bins, which name I can't remember. Is there a proposal? There's just a wall between Clark's yard and there, And the rest of that yard's quite a difficult area, I would think, to gentrify in any way. But there's a sort of open space towards the west end of it that's probably quite, there's quite a lot of opportunities there. Is the intent to try and spread into there?
Yes, yeah. Perhaps if I elaborate on so that's one of the interventions within the Towns Fund is it's classed as Skinnergate and the Yards Phase 2. So that will push out into the mechanics yard you're talking about,
yeah, that's right,
and post house wind and into Skinnergate itself. So we've got proposals to start looking at the wider engagement on that project, probably end of January, beginning of February time, where we'll open it up. I've been having to contain it at the minute because there's been a gradual wish to push it out into Skinnergate with various properties that have been developing their shop fronts up there. But we're just about on the cusp of opening that up, which will open the floodgates in the spec. But I agree with you, mechanics yard's got a lot of potential in there.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Chris for the update. It's always quite exciting to see how far we've progressed with the work and the investment that's going to be put into the town and the various areas. One thing that came out of the last meeting is that there were, from a couple of members, was about cameras on the actual yards themselves. Have we progressed with those plans?
Yes, in terms of sort of security and cameras up the yards, we've been in touch with the police about their Safer by Design. So a couple of days ago, we've got a report, which I haven't read yet, which is talking about the security issues in the yard in general. But in terms of the camera, we're in touch with our people that look after the CCTV within the town. And I believe those cameras in the yard are quite outdated. They're probably about 20-odd-year-old. So whereas I think at the minute we're probably heading along the lines of not more cameras, but upgrading the ones that are there. So instead of these old-fashioned point and direct ones, there'll probably be these ones in a globe, so you kind of tell where they're pointing, and much better images. So yeah, we are looking at that.
So is that going to be funded via this project, or will it be funded separately via the upgrades? Or
at the minute, specifically for the 2 yards, I'm looking at funding from this project if possible.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McKeown.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask something that which might sound a bit obtuse? To what extent, and apologies, Chris, I haven't read the detailed business cases, which I will seek to do. To what extent are we able to look at the impact on health of these measures? And when I say that, what I'm talking about is the reason we're doing this is our prime mission is improving health, wealth and happiness of local people. So within the business case and return on investment, etc., is there any sort of explicit mention or statement? I would expect it's implied, and Councillor Tate's mentioned cameras, and that's around, safety and well-being, reducing anxiety. So any thoughts? And if you can't answer it, fair enough.
I think Mark wants to come in there, but in terms of the yards project themselves, Mark, but I'll let you come in. In terms of the yard project themselves, which is just looking at Clarks and Bucktons, we haven't been recording anything specifically on health as we're going, but it's been fairly obvious during the discussions I've had and with both on site and online and via email. There's an enthusiasm down there, and it's certainly given businesses within the yards are certainly getting a lift from what is happening, which can only be good for the health of the people directly involved in that. But perhaps if Mark, did you want to comment further on the business cases and how that ties in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, if I may. I think what we've probably all experienced, and I think this has been well documented, is during the lockdown is the real importance of quality public realm, where people can break out in a safe environment, which is where we are socially distanced. I absolutely hate that term, but it's about being socially distanced, but managing to really enjoy the environment that's around here. Now, I think all members will agree that over many years, over decades, we probably, as a local authority and as a community and as a borough, have not taken advantages of what we've got within the yards, which are real historic gems and real places where people can break out from. Now, whether that's just sat down having their sandwich when they return to work once we've got through this period, or even just enjoying some of the fare that is provided by the local independent businesses. So while it hasn't been explicitly detailed in any business case yet, Councillor McEwen, because we just haven't completed them yet, but we feel that this is something which is really come to the fore through the COVID pandemic, that the opportunity for communities to mix in both a safe, secure, but likewise an area which uplifts you a little bit. I think it's really, really important that we do that, and I'm sure members have already noticed this with regards to the work that's happened along the linear park from Victoria Road to the back of the council offices up to St Cuthbert's Church, which is a fantastic new public realm area, which I see on a regular basis as I take my daily walks. People really enjoying that particular type of environment. So it's something that we will stress, Councillor McEwen, as the business cases are developed, that it's about civic pride, it's about community public health, it's about enjoying the environs which we can actually develop through capital investment, Chair. Hopefully that answers Councillor McEwen's question.
Thank you for that reassuring answer.
Thank you, Mark. I've got Councillor Boddy. Councillor Boddy. Okay. Looks as though Councillor Boddy's put his hand down. Just one question from myself. There's a 12-month path here to getting these projects signed off. In terms of the wider Towns Fund, have we still got scope to change direction? Because obviously it was commented earlier that the economy may be different coming out of COVID, and this may be, personally there would be a concern that we could be rigid.
I think, if anything, there's certainly in some of the area there's an awful lot of fluidity. If you look at what we're looking to achieve up in Northgate and up that particular area, one of my biggest challenges, if you like, is to try and refine down what is a large area into specific projects that are going to deliver and benefit the whole area in the best way. I feel once we step into that area, all sorts will come to the fore. I think what I'm looking at next and what the way forward is putting a toe in the water in the Skinnergate and Yards area, broadening that out, and that will show the way to the rest of the business cases, I think, across the Towns Fund. And it's trying to basically, the engagement we want to start in Skinnergate is similar in a way to what's happened up Victoria Road, is what we're proposing, where it's not going with any firm proposals. It's basically going out to them and saying, we've got some ideas. We're going to do some improvements up here to the public realm, up to the building frontages, whatever. What are your ideas? And then we take that back, develop it a bit further. And I think it's a very popular two-stage type engagement process. So certainly, I mean, in the conversations I've had within the yards, we've been changing direction even as we've been going through and having conversations with them. It's quite obvious that some of the, I think one of the high points in the meeting I had with them, the public meeting, was where I got sort of carried away, and I do get a bit enthusiastic about it and start talking about how businesses can diversify and start using the building as one thing during the day and perhaps another thing during the night. Because personally, I think that whereas at the minute hospitality is really struggling, I know personally, as soon as this opens up, people are going to be wanting to go out there. So this, what Andrew mentioned before there about two or three people looking to start pub businesses, ties in with their thinking ahead 6 months, 12 months to when people will be wanting to do things. They'll be wanting to go out to the yards and perhaps small events in the yards and things like that. So it's trying to build up the community within there. And I know there is a lot of enthusiasm there. And there's one particular cafe down Buckton's yard who's been struggling. And it was him who came back to me in the meeting and said, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to open up my place and, develop it much further. So I think flexibility, certainly from my side, is the name of the game, and it's what we've got to keep an ear to the ground. It's okay.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that reply. Mark, did you want to come up in on
Yeah,
that?
thanks, Chair. Just to just an answer to your question, really. I think it's important that we have and again, this is something that both Chris and I are very passionate about, and the Towns Board, and I'm sure members will be, is that we need to go out there with the blueprint of these are the high level ideas that we've got for changing the various areas, whether that be Northgate or Skinnergate or the yards. But it's absolutely crucial that we ensure that we engage really effectively with the stakeholders, that they come back, because this is not going to be plain sailing, members. I'll be honest, because we're going to have quite a few difficult patches going through this particular approach. And I'll just give you one idea as regards to what we're going to do with Skinnergate. Now, this has been a bit of a football that's been kicked about for years, whether you should pedestrianise it, should you open it up to traffic, should you allow parking on there. And I think you're going to get ideas from one end of the continuum to the other, and so therefore it's really important that we have that effective dialogue, and we're not going to please everybody all the time. So that degree of fluidity needs to be really embraced right the way through the development of the business case. So although people may at the end of the day say, well, I didn't really want that, but I understand why we've done it, that we don't necessarily kill ourselves through gaining that huge amount of consensus, but we give people the appreciation and the understanding that it is being developed through effective engagement and participation, rather than just the local authority and other organisations imposing it on it. So there is a degree of fluidity, and hopefully that will be embraced and finalised when the business cases are completed, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I've got Councillor Body. Is your microphone working now? Okay, doesn't seem to be. I think the question from Councillor Body was, has there been any thought to erecting statues to either George or Robert Stevenson being considered?
Not yet, not that I'm aware of. The closest we've went towards that is a small plaque on the planters. We're looking at that, but not as anything you're aware of, Mark, up at the Real Heritage Quarter.
It hasn't been touched upon, Councillor Body, through you, Chair, if I may, with regards to new statues. Can you hear me okay, Councillor Body? Are you receiving? Yeah. No, that hasn't. Just through past experiences, I know statues can be extremely expensive and sometimes not uncontroversial, but unfortunately, no, it's not something that we've looked into at this moment in time, Chair.
Okay. And I've got.
Is the microphone working?
Yeah, you were going to hear you now, Councillor Body.
Oh, great. Sorry, it's the headset. I do apologise. The headset microphone isn't working then. Yes, I just wanted to follow up really with that. I've looked at some preliminary costings for statues, and it varies depending on what material you choose. If you're going with marble or if you're going with bronze, there's a huge difference of a factor of about 10. It's 10 times more expensive for bronze, but it seems to work out around about the £75,000 mark per statue. And also the there are statues to both in other locations: Newcastle, the Science Museum in Oxford, Euston Station, and York Railway Museum. But nowhere in the world is there a statue to both of them in the same place. And I thought it might be a unique touch if we had a statue to both father and son, rather than just a statue to George or a statue to Robert, because they can be found elsewhere. But yeah, it would just be a unique touch. We don't really know what sort of financial position the council are going to be in by the time the bicentennial comes around now, because of the crisis, and we might have to scale down our plans for the bicentennial celebrations. Who knows? I don't think anybody can give you a definitive answer on that at the moment. So statues seem to be rather spectacular, but rather modest in terms of expenditure, alternative to maybe some of those plans that we had for the future. I don't want to see anything, any of the development of Northgate particularly clawed back, but those decisions aren't entirely in my hands, of course. And statues seem to me to be a significant way of marking the bicentennial that might not cost too much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Buddy. I'm sure your suggestion will be taken into account. Councillor Tate, did you want to come back in and then I'll wrap this item up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a question in regards to the timelines and like the spending of money. Obviously, we've gone into another period of lockdown for 6 to 7 weeks. Do we think that's going to impact any of the work, both from supply chain, because our materials available, and secondly, men on the ground to do the work, or actually will it be made easier because there'll be less public footfall in them areas because of the lockdown? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. I think you've virtually answered it there. I mean, yes, it will be easier because it's a lot quieter, so you haven't got people in the yards. It's a sad thing to say. In terms of manpower, we're using our own Public Works Department, who are the main contractor, but obviously we've got to subcontract quite a bit of the work. I don't know is a simple answer, right. But from my role, I suppose what I'm doing is saying we need to deliver and keeping the pressure on and keeping the drive on in a nice way, aware that everybody is struggling at the moment. But it's keeping that drive forward and keeping that momentum going forward. Now, I think I'd be able to put hand on heart and say to government, we've done everything we possibly can to spend this money. And at the minute, I believe we can, but the next 1 or 2 months may change that. But at the minute, it's positive.
Do we think they would be quite flexible with us if there was a slight delay because of the lockdown period or any of the impacts from COVID? They're not just going to whip it away from us, are they?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, at the minute, we're resisting the temptation to go back and say we're struggling. I wouldn't suggest or recommend that we go back to them at all until we're clear that we can't, because I think there's every possibility that we can at the moment. But the money is in our bank account, so they'd have to physically come back and get it, which is not going to look good. But
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Thank you, Chris, for that update. I'm sure all members really appreciate it, and we appreciate the difficult circumstances that you're working in at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Pleasure.
Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Greater Favourdale Birdry Garden Village Design Code, and I'd just like to bring in, is it yourself, Mark?
Hi, Chair. Yes, it is. Yeah. This is a something that members probably will be aware of, that it's development. If I can give you some just type of historical context of it all, you'll recall back in 2017, I think it was, Darlington were given the status of 2 garden villages. Clearly, Skirningham is one, and the other one of which this particular document is more relating to is the Bertree/Favourdale Garden Village. The development of these garden villages were very much at the centre of central government's approach to accelerating housing delivery, right across the country. As I said, we were fortunate to have 2 garden villages identified within the borough. The idea behind having this design code is to ensure that there is real quality in the developments, that they're not just seen as urban extensions, but they're seen as something which is quite different, which develops communities with high quality build, really effective and attractive landscaping, and therefore it'll probably set aside the idea that these developments are some form of urban extension. We've worked quite closely with obviously Design Northeast, who have been the authors of this particular development. We're aware that our colleagues in central government are really keen that local authorities adopted a design code for the garden villages. This is again will ensure that there's a high quality precedent set of the way that these are developed. We have come to the conclusion that the following discussions with Homes England and also other partners, that this is probably one of the most, I would say, appropriate approaches to adopt for a local authority. It's important to again come to that word flexibility, that design codes can change. We're not seeing a planning permission coming anytime soon, probably in the next 6 months, which we will then able to use this particular document to help to influence the way that this particular development is going to look, which will come forward in a number of tranches. And over that period of time, design codes may well change. Hence, this is why it's going to planning committee rather than through any other committee. And on a regular basis, guidance and direction from central government changes in the way that houses and landscapes should be looked, whether that be down to heritage aspects or environmental aspects, Chair. So I appreciate it's quite a hefty document, but what we would like is members of Scrutiny Committee and right across the council to take note of this particular document, forward to me any comments that you have, which will then be also presented to Councillor Jones's committee in due course, which will then be taken into account when any future planning applications are taken. As I said, Chair, we have to bear in mind that this is quite a flexible document which can change through guidance and direction from central government, and just changes in design itself, which are probably more appropriate in, let's say, 12, 24 months time than they are at this moment in time. So I just thought it would be really useful if members had a read of the document, get back to myself with any comments that they have, and we can then ensure that they're incorporated in any future discussions with Development Committee Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that. As you said, we don't want to discuss in detail today, but I would ask members to read the document and obviously feedback any questions with Mark, and I'd appreciate if you could just CC me in when you do that. Thank you. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 7, which is Central Park. It's a hybrid business innovation centre. Are you picking this one up, Mark, as well?
Councillor Harker's got his hand up, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Harker.
Sorry, Chair. If you asked for questions, I missed it. Apologies. It's a general question about, not so much about the detail of what's in the design code, and it's around, clearly the design code it's aspirational. It's not very specific because it is aspirational. And my question is really, in terms of when it comes to actually use the design code in determining planning applications, how does it work in 2 instances? One in terms of who actually ends up making the decision about whether an application meets that design code, because clearly it's going to be quite subjective, and I get the reasons why for that is. And the second question is that, when the builders come along and suck the teeth and say it's going to cost more than we thought, we found these problems, we need to devalue the scheme to enable us to do it and make a profit. how does that then fit in making sure that those design codes aren't whittled away at the time of delivery?
Chair, would you like me to respond? Thanks, Councillor Harker. You're quite correct. It is an ambitious document, but this is not something that we're going to keep hidden and then bring out at the 11th hour for any type of application. So we've worked closely with Homes England, who are a large landowner on this area. Now, they've already highlighted certain areas which I sometimes find a little bit strange, since the same government department are pushing for this particular type of standard. So yeah, as Councillor Harker is well experienced in planning committee, planning applications are always a series of I suppose negotiations and consensus. So it's about, I suppose, setting a standard that we expect to be actually delivered in these garden villages, and that each planning application will be submitted in accordance to various type of aspects of these guidance. Now, if we're saying that we're going to achieve every single element of these design codes, I think that would be rather naive of myself to think that each developer would get that. But it's about, I suppose, ensuring that any development that comes forward is of high quality and adheres to the principles of this design code. Some of it may well be in fullness, others may be in kind, but it gives members and also the community that assurance that quality developments are being delivered in garden villages, rather than just, as I said earlier, some form of urban extension. So it's a bit of a suck it and see, Councillor Harker, as how it goes, but we think it's important that we have this minimum standard going forward.
So, if I may, Chair, without naming some of the big house building companies, some just put cheap boxes in great numbers on land, and others have a different business model and do it differently. So, are we in a sense reliant on some of those businesses just not showing an interest, and other businesses coming forward who are prepared to produce much higher quality schemes? And thereby, potentially, if they don't come forward, are we sort of stuck in terms of being able to develop it to anywhere near our aspirations?
I think it depends on each application, obviously, Chair. And as I said before, this is the planning applications that will be forthcoming aren't going to be developed in a vacuum. They will be influenced by our adopted design code for planning committee. So it'll be a development over time. Clearly, this is going to be probably a 15-year development in Bertree. So it's important to recognise that things will change. But likewise, we don't necessarily want to deter applications coming forward, because some of these designs may well add a degree of, I would say, like financial conflict as regards to what they can actually afford. But as I said earlier, any planning application is a point of negotiation, and it's important that any future developer appreciates the minimum standards that we expect for a garden village.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I'll bring in Councillor Cruddas, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Yeah, I have sympathy with what Steve's saying there. It's the things that I wrote down after having spent last night reading this document is that the better quality standards that we're looking for here will be difficult for commercial building companies to justify. And I just wondered if there was any government upfront funding to try and enhance the quality for these particular garden villages, as they are sort of identified as a sort of desire, and that perhaps it, as when they delivered Letchworth and Welwyn Garden City and even Aycliffe, there was a sort of an authority set up that controlled the development in these areas. And I'm wondering if there's any indication the government might be intending that to happen on the garden villages. It might be something that spread over more than one garden village, but it seems to me that unless we have an authority to approve what's going here, there's a chance that it will get diluted. I don't know if there's a hint, Mark, that there might be some more upfront funding from the government, because the type of public facilities we're looking for here would seem to be very difficult to provide just out of, if you like, 106 money, if you like, as it's described now. Is there any hint that the government's going to help us out on that score?
Through you, Chair, if I may, Councillor Curtis, no, that I'm not aware of any funding that's coming forward. We've gained funding as a local authority to pull together the Garden Village position, which includes the design code as well. But as I said earlier, this has been done with the grace of government as well. That government want us to establish high quality residential developments within the Garden Village. So there is a national body of which all developers are aware of. So it's not just ourselves that are developing this type of design code. Other garden villages right across the country are also very much committed in developing these particular positional statements. So therefore, it's not as if it's going to be a shock to developers. They'll be aware that such design codes will be expected right across the spectre of garden villages. But in answer to your original question with regards to developers gaining additional funding, I would be surprised if that was forthcoming, since they are usually, quite wealthy private sector developers.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the update. And as I said, if we can email any questions or comments in. Okay, if we move back onto agenda item number 7, which is Central Park, the Hybrid Business Innovation Centre. And is this you again, Mark?
I think it is, Chair. So fortunately, I have read the report, and I have been part of the on the edges of the development of this particular scheme. This is looking at a new development on Central Park. As members will be aware, we've had some great successes there with the CPI and the Business Central, but also the National Horizon Centre, which was developed by Teesside University. Clearly, this is very much in vogue. This type of development, with the bio and sector, etc. And as members will be aware, this is a real push from the local authority to make this I suppose an area of expertise and an area of excellence. And this is just another piece of that particular jigsaw. The funding regime which has been adopted for this going forward are all detailed in the report, Chair. But this is a real good news story, and the feedback we get from the current tenants within Central Park of where it is at the moment is that this is an excellent position for this to be developed into a regional, if not a national area of significance for these particular types of industries. The innovation centre that's been put forward at this moment in time with this new funding is like a mixed bag. You've got the CPI, which is a extremely highly specified and focused office building. It's more of a laboratory labs building. This is a bit of a hybrid, which will have the opportunity for small and medium-sized enterprises to be located and accommodated, but also some lab space as well, Chair. So this particular development will really add to the overall impression that Darlington has got this area of expertise. And so, Chair, it goes to Cabinet on the 12th of January, and I'll try to answer any questions that members may want to pose.
Thank you, Mark. I've got Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. It's really good news to see that this is going to pop up in the next few years. Obviously, we've got a big bit of wasteland there in Central Park between the residential and the Business Central that's needed some work for a long time, although that is where I walk my dog, so the more you build there, I'll have to go further afield. I was wondering, firstly, Business Central, it says still at 90% occupancy, and as someone who's actively involved in the stakeholders committee, I know that they've had a lot of businesses that have left. So I was just wondering if there's an up-to-date figure of that due to COVID. And secondly, another concern that's always raised at stakeholder meetings is the fact that we built the Horizon Centre, but we still have wasteland leading up to it. Are we going to deal with the other plots at the same time to tidy it up, or are we going to leave them as they are? Because it's not a very nice view for people visiting the site.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And through you, Chair. Yeah, I haven't got any figures at this moment in time, but I'll be able to pick up that with regards to the current occupancy rates within Business Central, and I'll drop you a line, copy you in, Chair, with regards to what the current position is, and I'll send it through to all committee members. There is a master plan for Central Park, as members probably will be aware. That the master plan does change as demand either contracts or expands, and so therefore it is quite flexible with that. We have got plans to ensure that all plots are actually developed to give it that real feel of gravitas for future investment. So this is just the next building block of that. So we want to ensure that there is some real good public realm out there as well to enhance the whole area. But I know CPI were interested in an area adjacent to their current accommodation. That hasn't been forthcoming over the last 9 months, but as I said, we're really encouraged by the fact that we have managed to get funding for this, that the business case does stack up, and it just bodes well for the future development. Councillor Renton.
Thank you. I didn't necessarily mean development of the land. Right opposite where you're going to build this centre, there's just a huge pile of asbestos and railway waste that just sits right in the middle of a plot. What I mean is just clean up the area, the whole area. And I know there's some issues with ownership of land in that area, but if we're going to build this centre, it'd be nice just to cut it back and make it look presentable before we have to develop on it.
Yeah, Councillor Renton's quite correct through you, Chair. There is some real issues with regards to various types of spoils that have been left. We've had issues over Japanese knotweed as well, which is quite a difficult piece of plant to actually manage. So I'm sure my colleagues in capital projects have got these plans, and again, probably in the fullness of time, Chair, a report back to this committee as regards to the overall ambitions for Central Park will help to answer some of Councillor Renton's questions.
Thank you.
No, that would be appreciated, Mark. Got Councillor McEwen.
You're on mute, Chris.
Apologies, schoolboy error.
Practicing for the council.
Great. Sorry?
Practicing for the council.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Cruddas. Good news. Just want to understand, and I am positive about this, but if there's been any sensitivity analysis done in the current climate, I know it's difficult in terms of potential market for this, and I know there is an interdependency with CPI potentially given proximity, but has anything been done recently around potential occupancy? And apologies if I've missed it in reading the document.
Yeah, the business case for the development is very much predicated upon the fact that we can actually make some good strides in getting this filled as quickly as possible. There's clearly the demand out there for this type of growing businesses, and so while in some respects there is a degree of speculation in this type of build, but the feedback that we're getting from CPI, from the National Horizon Centre, etc., are encouraging that there is a market out there for these types of accommodation, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Thank you, Mark. Okay, just one question from me is there's obviously this ERDF funding. With Brexit, that's not compromised in any way.
My understanding, Chair, it was secured before we left, so therefore it's a commitment from the European Development European. I can't remember. It's that long ago that we left that I can't remember what ERDF stands for. European
Regional Development Fund.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I really appreciate that. Got Councillor Marshall, you got your hand up there?
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair, thanks. Just to follow on from Councillor McEwen, Mark, does the award of with regards to the business case for the business centre, does the fact that the National Horizon Centre has become one of 3 national training centres for enhancing the workforce and the expansion of life sciences enhance the business case that we've got for this building?
Thanks, Chair. Through you, Chair, Councillor Marshall. Yeah, it's the idea of like building the development of a focused hub. Clearly, the existence of CPI is a real pull for future development. But likewise, the way that dovetails in with a lot of the work that the National Horizon Centre gives it that gravitas, as I said before, and that real potential of something that could be both regional and national. And we'd also be working very closely with other areas within the Tees Valley, where I'm thinking about Fujitsu over in Billingham as well. And so there is a great deal of trade-off and a great deal of networking and dovetailing, as I say, with those types of developments.
I'll very quickly bring Councillor Tate in.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a follow-up question from the Chair's question, actually, about the ERDF funding. Page 84, the table states that we're waiting for the agreement and it was expected in early January. And then point number 4 says the approval is forthcoming on the proviso that we get the ERDF funding. So is that funding now agreed?
The funding is practically there, Councillor Tate. I think there's just a number of pieces of work to complete before that's secured.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate the update. Okay, if we move on to agenda item number 8, which is to consider the medium-term plan, and I'd like to bring in Elizabeth Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. This is following my presentation to all members pre-Christmas. Hopefully all members of this committee were able to attend. And really, I know that we've got a session, this committee's got a session at the end of the month, I think on the 19th, which will hear all the representations from all the other scrutiny committees. But this today was about particular issues with regard to this committee, and if there was any questions that members had in relation to the economy or resources areas of the MTFP. So really, Chair, it was just for questions for today, please.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'll open up the floor. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Harker.
Thanks, Jed. Sorry, struggling with mute buttons. It's a question about the level of reserves. I mean, members will be aware that when this administrative cycle came in, it was clear that the MTFP was put together using reserves over a 4-year period, and at some point that's an issue that needs addressing. I clearly understand that Council's in a difficult position at the moment because of COVID and a lot of uncertainty around finances going forward. So a couple of questions relating to the reserve. Have we had any yet further details from government about what settlement means and whether that's needed you to change your views about what council needs to do? And secondly, given that effectively what's happening is that we're pushing further into the future, addressing the heavy use of the reserves, at what point are you, as the Chief Finance Officer, going to get a bit nervous about over-reliance on reserves going forward. I.e., at what point now would you say that we need to start addressing that and either make a decision, guess the government's going to help us out, or accept the reality of the UK being in a poor position economically, and take the view that probably more cuts or no further help will come forward, and that we have to start tackling those that overuse of reserves going forward. Because I appreciate financial savings, particularly after 10 years of cuts, become more and more difficult and therefore take much longer to embed than they perhaps would have done a number of years ago when money was more available.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Yes, with regard to the settlement, we have had one positive confirmation that there is going to be a tranche 5 of COVID funding for 21-22. Now, that that hasn't been discussed with Cabinet yet, but that will help with the pressures that were put in. It is only one-off money, of course. With regard to the new lockdown, there could potentially be more expenditure as well. So I would advise cautiousness on that, given it's one-off money, but it should cover the COVID pressures we'd identified originally for next year. So that is good news. With regard to reserves, yes, you're quite right. We've been using reserves to balance the MTFP, and again, it's proposed that it's done for the next 4 years as well. I think the big issue for me is the fair funding review. Now, this has been pushed back 2 years now, firstly for Brexit, secondly because of the COVID situation, and we have been promised it will come next year. And we really need to see what that is. So we've got to start in position so we know what our future funding is going forward. I think before we start making any big decisions on service provision. If we get that next year, we will still have plenty of time with regard to reserves, because as you know, we've got a 20 million going down to about 3.5 by the end of year 4. So I think we are, as Chief Finance Officer, I would advise that we wait till a fair funding review coming next year and see what it looks like, given the government's talked about levelling up as well. And I think also the response to COVID, they have recognised the importance of local government and how it helps our communities. And I think it would be very strange if they reduced our funding, put it that way. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor Harker, but my advice would be is wait till our fair funding review is before making any major decisions on service provision.
If I can come back, Chair, I mean, given the situation with COVID, given that there's a new strain that's causing havoc, the reality of a fair funding review happening this coming financial year is in the balance, I would guess, and certainly my view at the moment is the reality of government having the capacity to do that is probably going to be not this year, and hence the impact to us may not be known not next financial year, but the year after. And hence my concern is that we are in an unfortunate situation, not of our own making, where we may end up having to make financial decisions because we need to, without really having any certainty from government for a whole host of reasons. And I suppose putting the decision off for another year, I can see fits with the MTFP works, but are we going to be in a position to else put it off for a further 2 years if that's what happens in terms of that fair funding review not happening in this in the next financial year?
I think just in response to that, the way they've put the fair funding review for the last 2 years, it has been funded. So in one way, what the government have done is rolled forward all of the grants and put inflation on them. So if that even if the fair funding review didn't happen next year, it's likely they would roll forward the funding levels that we have had. So we would be able to push the MTFP back a further year also. So again, I think it's my advice would be is until we have more certainty on funding, and given the position we are on balances, that we are in that fortunate position and do have balances left. I've talked about the 3.5 million at the end of year 4. Of course, we've got our risk reserve as well, which we have increased this year by £1 million, given the COVID situation, that I think it would be better to wait until we have more certainty, given we do have balances that we can utilise before making any significant expenditure decisions. However, this time next year might be a different situation, and we would have to review it at that point in time.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Boddy.
Yes, can you hear me okay? I just wondered how much the risk reserve actually is.
It's a 5.35 million.
Oh, that's very reassuring. Thank you.
Okay. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay. If I could just ask something, Elizabeth. It's just on the financing costs. Could you just give the committee just an explanation as to the increase in the 2023, 2024 and onwards?
Yes, this was regard to a decision that was made a good few years ago now. So all local authorities have to make a minimum revenue provision on their capital, on their debt, basically, and capital funding. And that's, I suppose, in easy terms, what is it? It's like a repayment, a commitment to repayment. However, Darlington had been over-providing, as had a number of local authorities in previous years. So a decision was made, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago now, through the Treasury Management Strategy, which was agreed through full council, that we take what we call an MRP holiday. So we haven't been paying that back for the last few years because we haven't needed to, because we'd over-provided beforehand. However, that holiday comes to an end in that year, which is why the increase in costs comes on financing. I'm not sure if that's clear or not. I know it's a bit technical, but I can certainly, if members, I can certainly pull a report out that was agreed through council if anybody wanted to look at that. But basically, we didn't have to pay because we'd overpaid for like 20 years. So we took a holiday, which is now finished.
Okay. I appreciate that. Is that any other members got any questions? Any comments? Just one thing. In terms of just want to clarify in terms of the pay award and what the impact is on the council's MTFP. Now, it looks as though it's £500,000 in terms of the demand.
Yes, I mean, we don't know what the pay award will be next year. We had originally assumed a 2% across the board. However, given the government's comments that have been made on public sector pay in general, we have reduced that to a 1% or a 1% assumption, which is about £500,000. But at this point in time, we've got absolutely no idea what the pay award is. Whilst the government has got jurisdiction over most public sector pay, it doesn't have jurisdiction over local government pay because local government is the employer. So I'm sure the unions will be coming to the national employers soon with a pay claim, but we don't know what that is yet for next year. And then following that, there'll be no negotiations. But we have 1% covered in the budget for next year for that.
Okay, and that £500,000 that would equate to 1% of council tax increase.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I've got Councillor Hughes.
Just on that pay award, does that take into account any increase in the minimum wage rises as well, which are in addition to any negotiated pay rise?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, the council already pays above national or living wage by not quite a bit, but certainly not within the realm. So we were already covered in the pay scale on that. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Chair, can I just through you just say, however, you will see there is a pressure that we have put in with regard to social care because, of course, the national living wage does affect our social care contracts. Whilst they're not our direct employees, there is a pressure in the budget for that with regard to contract issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? Okay. There was just something from me, Elizabeth, in terms of the list of charges. It looks as though we were going to be increasing the cost of junior swimming by an amount which is way over and above inflation, and it was just a concern for me. You know, it's a very, very small number within the MTFP, but it would just be interesting to understand what the revenue impact of that would be. You know, hopefully the Dolphin Centre will reopen, and hopefully, you know, children safely will be able to use that, especially within the summer, and then divert away from other sources of water and recreation.
Thank you, Chair. I shall find out from the manager of the service and get back to you on that.
Thank you. Just so finally to the floor, have we got any questions or comments? We will obviously reconvene a special meeting to pull everything together and take into consideration comments from other scrutiny committees. Okay. No. Thank you, Elizabeth. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right. Okay. If we move on to agenda item number 9, which is to consider the work programme of this scrutiny committee, and I'll just hand over to Shirley.
Thanks, Chair. It's your usual standard work programme report for members to consider. If you can just review the information that's in Appendix 1 to see if that's still relevant for scrutiny, and whether or not members wish to consider adding any additional items to the previously agreed work programme. Thank you.
Okay. Well, just first of all, there were 2 items which we were potentially going to look at, and if I could bring Elizabeth back in on this. Councillor Harker made a comment at the last meeting in terms of has any work been undertaken to look at the well-being of staff and also the productivity, and I know that we had a briefing in Councillor Harker's also as well. It's just, how do we then move this forward? I know there's an employee survey which is going out. If you could just explain to the committee what that will be.
Certainly, yes, we have a biannual employee survey which goes out. It covers some standard areas like leadership, communications, motivations, but also importantly is part of the health and well-being as well. So it asks about employees' health and well-being, and we put those health and safety questions in, which come from the HSE surveys as well. So we do that on a biannual basis. It's due to go out at the end of this month. To be honest, it might go into February now just because of work capacity, but that goes out, and in the past what we've done is analyse those results, and they've been taken to our joint JCC committee, which is our management union committee, and then following that there's always a work programme or an action plan on what we need to do, because obviously we break it down into each different service areas to see if there's any changes. It has just been pretty much standard questions with a few tweaks each year, because we want to have some sort of baseline to look at. But yes, Chair, that will be going out in February, and it's usually about a 6-week process, because we send it out and then hassle people to fill it in for a little while. But it gives us a good benchmark of how the land lies and how staff are feeling.
Okay, and just before bringing in Councillor Harker, Councillor Tate, you just want a quick question there?
Yes, please. It's just around the survey that's going to go out, Chair. Does it go out to every single employee?
Yes.
Okay, and what's usually the completion rate on that, please, Elizabeth?
I'm trying to recall. We got quite a good one last time. I think it was about 60%. I think the unions were very happy with the reply, because they said it was better than any surveys they ever get back. But that's why it takes a little bit longer, because we give them a first few weeks and then we push again. And obviously there's a proportion of our workforce that don't have IT, so we have paper copies and things that go out. So we push as hard as we can.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Harker, could I just bring you in? Would you like to make any comment?
Sure, yes, thanks, Chair. It is a difficult one because I fully understand the need for consistency of questioning to gauge trends over time, because without it you don't really get any sense of whether the organisation's changing or whether there's detrimental effects to employees. I guess my concern is at the moment that given clearly COVID is a once in a lifetime, or hopefully it's a once in a lifetime event, it is very different, and therefore I suppose my concern is whether the impacts of that on staff clearly will be very different to any other year, and hence whether the questions that we ask fully cater for the fact that we are in very strange circumstances, and whether it is an occasion where we do need to add in additional questions, accepting the fact that it takes us away from consistent questioning and asking staff, how they're feeling over a longer period of time, and whether we do need to deviate from what we've done recently. It's a balance at the end, isn't it, between maintaining consistency over a period of time, but equally accepting that we are in very unusual circumstances, and impacts to staff may be very different this year from any other year that we've seen or will see.
Chair, if I could just come back on that one, I totally agree, Councillor Harker, and I don't think there's any problem putting a few more questions in. I think what we wanted to do was just keep the questions we had, just so we have got some consistency, but we certainly could add some more in. But what I failed to mention, actually, and this won't go to all staff, is that there's also an agile working project going on at the moment. It's just in its infancy, but this is looking at how we work differently, and I think we might have mentioned it in a previous committee. We're also, the project manager there is also looking at putting a questionnaire out to people who are working from home on how that's going. Now, we did this back in autumn, but we realised that with the dark winter months coming forward, people could have different views, opinions, and how long it's gone on. So that's also going out, but that's not to the whole workforce. It would just be for the people who are working from home, who used to work in office. So that will help complement, I suppose, those people. But yeah, I certainly we're very open to any ideas on different questions, or any additional questions. I know the HR team are looking at what we could put into our overall survey, but certainly any ideas that would be greatly received.
I've just got Councillor Tate, and then I'd just like to make a comment on this.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in regards to the survey itself, and you said about the additional survey for people working from home. These type of surveys is something that I get in my day job, but biannually as well, twice a year. And they're quite complex, or can be quite complex, depending on what the build is. One of the options you can build into it is different paths depending on how they answer it. So if one of the question is, are you usually office based but currently working from home? If they then answer yes to that would then could lead them, that specific person could then be asked to fill out different set of questions. Is that not something we would look to do, rather than repeating like a whole survey? It would just be built into one.
We could do, it's just we wanted to do that now quite quickly. Okay. That was all, and we know who these people are, so we know that they are actually working from home as well. I certainly take your point on survey overload, but it is quite a short one really, about if you got your equipment, how are you feeling, so I think it will be all right, Councillor Tate, but I certainly take that point in on overload. Yes, we might come and ask some advice on survey types.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's difficult to see where we can go with this at this moment in time in terms of the work programme. What I'm thinking, and if you're happy with this, Councillor Harker, is that we obviously have sight of the questionnaire, which hopefully will include some questions around COVID. That then is obviously then going to move through up into the JCC committee. Now, Councillor Harker, and if I remember right, Councillor Hughes, yeah, we sit on that committee. So there's a good number of us within that committee. We can then obviously then get our heads together and then decide whether or not how the work programme is then going to work through, and then we bring this back. If you're happy with that, okay, yeah. So yes, if we could have sight of that that questionnaire, then that would be absolutely fantastic. Just moving on. We talked about youth and employment and potentially a piece of work. Now, I know the mayor has done a lot of work on this, and he actually briefed me. Would you like to just come in, Councillor McEwen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have discussed this, and may I apologise to you, Chair, and also the committee. I was meant to have completed a quad of aims, which I haven't, but I've sent you a briefing note. What I would suggest is that as a committee, we do look at youth unemployment, perhaps with children and young people. And the rationale is, as you suggested, Chair, I've made it one of my 4 mayoral priorities, because I do believe that as a consequence of COVID, young people, and when I say young people, I'm going up to the age of 24, may be disproportionately hit as a consequence of the economic turmoil and change that might be occurring. And that's because they may be in sectors that are more prone to the impact economically of what's happening as a consequence of COVID. And there is some evidence that has been circulated in quite a few council reports to this effect. And I think what we need to do is have assurance that we are, where we're able to positively impact upon this. And I'm particularly concerned that young people might be crowded out of what might have been traditional jobs for them by people who may be older and more experienced. I'm not sure what we can do about this, but I think we would be remiss as a committee working in partnership with potentially children and young people, because it's not all about education, training and skills. It's also about economic issues and employment. So I do think it is something that we should progress, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. I'll bring in Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. Just on the upper age group as well, I think I mentioned this before, but we need to be mindful of we have a lot of recent graduates that will have returned back to Darlington that have been away at university who are unemployed at the moment. I mean, my own daughter is one of these, and I'm aware that quite a lot of her friends have done the same thing. So, bearing in mind we have a skills gap with level 4s, we have a ready-made pot of young people there that we really need to be making sure that they don't disappear out of Darlington and take those skills with them. So that needs to be factored into when we're looking at the youth and employment as well, and not just the school leavers. And that's why it's important that we go up to the, taking up to the 24, 25 young people.
Chair, can I just come in on that? I'm sure we've all got family members who we know of, particularly graduates, have come back. I've got 2 nephews, not in Darlington, but who are at home, just can't get on the jobs ladder. They're chasing vacancies where there's 15, 30 applicants for each job.
No, thank you, Councillor McEwen. Yeah, I think where we'll go with this is if I could set up a meeting between myself, the chair of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee, and you, Mr. Mayor, and see how we take this forward. You're happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy. Might it be useful? You feel free to share my email that I sent to you with the committee members if you so wish. Yeah, I think Councillor Tate had a question as well, Chair.
I will do. Yes, he has. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, if I'm allowed to come in at this point. It was just in regards to youth unemployment. It is important. It should be on our radar. I'm just conscious that I think there was a question from full council that was raised by Councillor Hughes. I know that there's been a detailed response sent out on behalf of Heather Scott, so that's available too. Does highlight different things that we are already doing, but it's great to keep the conversation going.
Thanks for reminding us of that, Councillor Tate. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, have we got any other comments with regards to the work programme? Okay, so we're happy to leave as is, but obviously we'll move forward with those 2 potential pieces of work. Okay. On mute. If we could just move on. We've all fallen victim to that, haven't we? Yes, supplementary items. There aren't any that I'm aware of. Would anybody like to raise anything? Okay. We've got any questions? Oh, well, thank you very much for everybody attending. And as I said right at the beginning, Happy New Year to you all. Fingers crossed 2021 ends up better than 2020 did.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Have a nice day.
Thanks, Chair.
And you, thank you.
Cheers.